What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter Burdnett, and it is a Victory Monday for my hometown Cleveland Browns, but obviously we're going to be talking about college football today, and there was really a headliner this past week, and look ahead a little bit to next week. It's kind of a slow week. There's not a single ranked matchup, but the big one in week 2 was Texas upsetting Alabama at Bryant-Denny Stadium in Tuscaloosa, and it was a big win for the Longhorns. For the most part in the game, they kind of controlled what happened in the game. They dictated the tempo, the play, and everything, and really kind of took Alabama apart for the most part. It's not like they put up a ridiculous number of yards or points or anything like that, but I think the Longhorns really got the job done against Alabama in really all three facets of the game. I mean, yeah, you look at the field goals, special teams, they were able to make all those field goals. They would have maybe typically hoped to have gotten a few more touchdowns, but I think they did a really good job of slowing down Alabama, and especially in that first half, forcing 3 field goals. Obviously, the Crimson Tide made all 3, but those were drives that if those end in touchdowns, it's probably a much different ball game. And some of those plays defensively, obviously, they were able to consistently just limit the passing game. And then the big standout player for me, the one that from looking back at the game again, is Anthony Hill Jr. I think he had a couple of sacks. He was really a bullet coming in through the Crimson Tide offensive line and just made a lot of impact big plays to shut down the Alabama offense in many ways. And so big play from the true freshman out of Denton, Texas for the Longhorns. And obviously offensively as well, Quinn Ewers had a big game at quarterback, really highly efficient. I'll pop up his stats here on the screen, but he has some incredible wide receivers. You've got Xavier. He had one throw into the end zone that he lofted up, and it's one of those passes that it's like, it almost looked like it's just kind of a heave, like go up and get it, and Xavier was able to get down under the ball, and it was perfectly placed over the DB. I think maybe that was against Kool-Aid McKinstry, who, from looking back at really mostly the key plays of the game, I didn't watch back the entire game, the game in its entirety, but I don't know, maybe it's because of the fast pace of the Texas offense, but he appeared a step slow from what I was seeing in some of the plays of the game. Obviously, he is a top-notch cornerback. I'm not trying to take away from who Kool-Aid is as a player, but it just seemed like he was maybe a step slow, and credit to the Texas wide receivers for maybe forcing some of that. Again, especially Worthy, and really another guy who took him apart was Adonai Mitchell, the Georgia transfer, who already has, in some aspects, been able to take apart SEC defenses already. So going up against Alabama, a little bit of that carryover effect. And then Jordan Whittington as well, and the running backs were able to get the job done for Texas. And it was a huge win. Before the season, I did say Alabama was my national championship prediction. I'm going to own that pick, and I'm not saying that that's not still a possibility. I think there's a lot of holes. I think looking at this game, kind of looking back, I should have considered a little bit more the impact and the effectiveness of Texas's pass rush. They were among the best they were the best in pressures last year, and they were able to get the job done with some sacks against the Crimson Tide and against an offensive line that's still trying to mesh together a little bit, that has a lot of turnover from last year. Texas, as I guess maybe could have been expected, but not too many people maybe saw. I guess a lot of the media did favor the Longhorns a bit to at least compete, but I think Texas really took advantage of that. They were able to bring consistent pressure throughout the game and get home to Jalen Milroe, who had an all right game. It wasn't like he was so poor he threw the game away, but obviously he wasn't to a level that was quite what was needed for Alabama to get the W. And so it's a big win for Texas. It transforms really what they can do this season, or I guess maybe solidifies what they can do. Looking at this, I was like, going into the season, I was expecting them to drop this one, and then expecting them to maybe drop a game in Big 12 play and to finish the season with 2 losses. Now looking at it, there's one team that I think is the best chance, maybe 2, to compete with them. I think that's Kansas State, obviously the reigning Big 12 champions. They have a game that if with no ranked matchups going on, if you want to keep an eye on this one, Kansas State at Missouri, both teams are 2-0. K-State's number 15 in the country. It's in Columbia, Missouri. So the Tigers will have the home field advantage. They were able to, they were really actually quite close to upsetting Georgia last year. And so to keep an eye on that game. It's a noon game, 11 o'clock Central Time on SEC Network, kind of an under-the-radar game. And in a week where there's not really a prime time marquee matchup, I think that'll be something that people can keep an eye on. There's another competitive game. Illinois did not look at all like what I expected them to this season against Kansas, but they do host Penn State this week, so definitely a game for the Nittany Lions to be on a little bit of upset watch. I think they probably handle business there. They've looked really good. Drew Aller at quarterback has looked really good for the Nittany Lions. But back quickly to Texas, Alabama, just to wrap up that point. The Longhorns looked really good, and the Crimson Tide, I going into the season, part of why is like a Nick Saban coach team is almost a lock to bounce back, and so I'd expect them to this week in pretty dominant fashion against South Florida. It is in Tampa, but it's not like that's a formidable fortress or anything that the Crimson Tide are going into. And so Alabama, they've got some work to do. They have a tough slate. I think they host Ole Miss the following week, which week 4 is going to be a doozy. I think right now there's 6 ranked matchups, and that doesn't even include a game that we expected to be big, Florida State at Clemson. Obviously, that one has lost a lot of the luster after Clemson's loss to Duke. But let me know your thoughts on Texas's win. I think they're now in a prime position where they could even afford to drop a game in the Big 12 and still be in serious college football playoff consideration, especially if it comes down to one-loss Texas versus one-loss Alabama, which I think is a possibility. Looking at Alabama, I think they probably finish with 2, maybe 3 losses. The second loss, if it's just 2, would probably be in the SEC championship game to Georgia. But definitely don't count out the Crimson Tide just yet. They get kind of a tune-up game this week to work on some things before they host Ole Miss. And then Texas, they host the aforementioned Kansas State, which will be a big game. I'd expect that one to, at the very least, be top 15. And if K-State can rattle off some wins, Oklahoma's the other team to watch. Touched on that earlier. Didn't quite mention the Sooners, but definitely a lot to keep an eye on. Huge win for Texas that shifted what can happen this year. And I'm really looking forward to that week 4 action. I think Colorado is at Oregon that week because the Pac-12 is probably definitely the most competitive conference, I think, this year when it comes to ranked teams. I think they have 6, maybe 7 teams in the top 25 now. So let me know, though, your thoughts on Texas upset win over Alabama. Let me know your thoughts on the week 3 action. If there's any games that maybe are under the radar that I didn't mention that we should be keeping an eye on. But that's it for this episode of College Football Talk with Peter Burnett. I'm your host, signing out. Peace.